Hello, and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host, Rob. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Evoker Wizard, because yes, I still need to do more wizards. Way behind. But that's alright. We're going to be starting with Evoker today. Now, I know in the past I've made multiple videos talking about direct damage spells, and how I'm really not a fan of direct damage in 5th edition. I just find that the monster hit points scale up way faster than your damage spells do, and I've seen this specifically with Evoker style wizards too many times, where your spell book is 30 spells and 25 of them are evocation spells. And I really just think that's a lot of overkill. And I'm not saying that evocation spells are bad. We all know Fireball is just an absolute god tier spell when you get it at level 5. But we also know that while it's still decent at level 15, it's nowhere near as good. That's just a fact of life. And things like Scorching Ray, which are great when you're level 3, are not very good at all by the time you're 15 or 17 or whatever. And so when you have a ton of these evocation spells in your spell book, and you've got like 6 fire spells, and 5 cold spells, and 3 electricity spells, and a couple acid spells, and just every type of damage you can find, you end up with a ton of redundancy. And yeah, when you're 17th level, you don't have to have Searing Bolts still in your spellbook, or Scorching Ray, sorry, still in your spellbook. You don't have to have it prepared, So, it's not like you're always going to have it and you're always going to be stuck with it. But for some reason, it seems like when we're playing an Evoker, we overlook the fact that in addition to taking great spells like Fireball, we could be taking Counterspell and things like Mirror Image. We could be taking Dimension Door, There's nothing stopping you from casting a Wall of Force or a Wall of Stone or a Force Cage or Demiplane or any of these other great spells that just don't happen to be evocation spells. And I don't know why, but it always seems that it's most plentiful with the Evoker, where we just get into our head and we just want to do a lot of damage. And damage is fun. I'm not saying that, as satisfying as I personally find it to be able to cast like a hold person or a hold monster and set up my teammates, there's something really satisfying about being the paladin who then unloads a massive super crit onto that held person or monster that you just set them up for. And, there's something fun about rolling a bunch of dice for a Fireball. It just is. That's part of the joy of Fireball. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That's like lizard brain in full motion there. And that's great. But I do think that we need to keep in mind that we really need a few go-to AoE type damage spells, and that, having a couple different elemental types or damage types is a good thing. But you don't need to have 25 of them all prepared all at once. And I think it's usually a mistake if we do. So I actually have an entire video talking about direct damage spells. I'll try to remember to put a link to that in the description. If I don't, I'll put it into the comment section, whatever. But just to really briefly sum things up, because I don't want to be redundant. A lot of times, by the time you're looking at like a CR1 or 2 creature, by the time you get to like a CR4, they have double or even triple the hit points in some cases. And our spells have not tripled in damage. Let me tell you that. So this is really the essential problem. The other thing is that a lot of them give saves for half, which cuts into our damage even more, and that as we fight higher level creatures, a lot of them have different resistance types that we might not be aware of, or they have things like legendary saves, so you try to hit something with a disintegrate, or whatever, and then it just fails its saving throw, and you're like, yes, I'm going to do truckloads of damage here. And then they're like, actually, I'm just going to use a legendary save and take nothing. And you're like, ow. So disappointing. And I think Evokers really bear the brunt of this worse than a lot of others. That being said, I'm not saying that Evokers are bad. Evokers have kind of overcome 2 of the big problems. Because there's another one I haven't mentioned, and that's Initiative. But Evokers really can get around that with their level 2 ability, Sculpt Spells, which is an amazing, amazing ability, and you get it at level 2. And that's one of the things that actually makes Evokers really, really good. So just to go briefly into this situation, the problem you often have, let's say you're not an Evoker, you roll Initiative, you want to drop a Fireball on all these orcs, but you roll a 4 for your initiative. Now, not only are you going to have a hard time convincing your party's fighter and your paladin to both hold back when they're both close combat melee guys and wait for you to get your fireball on the orcs, but you're probably going to have an even harder time convincing the orcs not to just charge the party. So a lot of times with direct damage spells, you really need to have a high initiative. That's one of the reasons I recommend the alert feat so often for different wizards, because you want to be able to go fast enough to get your spell in before everybody else had a chance to act and screw up your beautiful plan that you had all set up. But the Evoker, because of sculpt spells, can just designate certain people to not be hit by the spell. And this means that even if your paladin or your fighter or barbarian or all three, or your melee ranger that you also have in your party, they all decide to charge in, you can just fireball anyways and just select those guys not to take the damage. And it really allows the Evoker to have a lot of value that other blaster casters don't necessarily have. And yes, sorcerers can do something similar with meta magic, but it eats up a lot of spell points when you start doing it. And the Evoker just gets that for free, basically, all the time. Whenever you're casting an evocation spell, you can do this. And it just adds a lot of value to Evokers and helps them to remain a lot more relevant than a generic blaster caster would be. And so that's a good thing, in my opinion. And like I said, you don't have to only take evocation spells. There's nothing wrong with having a bunch of great other spells, but just knowing that I've got a few big bombs that I'm going to drop. My fireballs, my cone of cold, my chain lightning, whatever it is. And, you know, when things get bad, I've got those that I can go to, and they're even going to hit a little bit harder than they would on other people as well. So let's get into the actual abilities. At level 2, you're going to get your Evocation Savant. Every wizard gets whatever Savant. It's not great, just means you can scribe spells into your spellbook of that type for half cost. But you also get Sculpt Spells. And like I mentioned, this ability is amazing. Whenever you cast an evocation spell that affects other creatures that you can see, you can choose a number of them equal to 1 plus the spell's level. The chosen creatures automatically succeed on their saving throws against the spell, and they take no damage if they would normally take half on a successful save. So let's say you're using our previous example and you want to cast Fireball on a bunch of orcs, but you rolled a 4 for your initiative, and now all your party members have charged in and they're all fighting the orcs in a giant scrum. So Fireball is a 3rd level spell, so that's 3 targets you can exclude, plus you get an extra target as well. That brings it up to 4 targets, obviously. So you can choose your paladin, your fighter, and your barbarian, and the melee ranger that we mentioned earlier, and say those 4 are automatically going to be considered to make their saving throw. And if the spell would only give half damage on a successful save, like Fireball does, in this case, they take no damage, so they are basically immune to your Fireball spell. And this just adds a lot of value to the spell. It means even if somebody charges the party, you might be able to like back off with your movement, assuming that you weren't on the front line, which why were you, and still drop a fireball on your party without hurting them all. Now, I do think it's important to clarify, you might want to talk to your DM about how this works, whether or not you can exclude yourself. Back in, I think it was 2016, Mike Morales had actually sent out a tweet to clarify the spell, saying the wizard could include himself. But then a year later, Jeremy Crawford clarified and said the wizard cannot include himself in this effect. And strictly written as it is in the book, it says you can choose a number of creatures other than yourself that you can see. Or a number of other creatures, that you can see. So, I mean, other creatures would kind of lead me to believe you can't choose yourself. But, like I said, maybe talk to your dungeon master. If he's cool with it, he might allow it. And even if he doesn't, it's an amazing ability, and definitely one of the real reasons to play an Evoker. Other than just the fun of blowing things up with Fireball, of course. Level 6, Potent Cantrip. Starting at level 6, your damaging cantrips will still do half damage if they would normally do none, and creatures suffer no additional effect from the cantrip. Now, unfortunately, most of our evocation cantrips are things like Scorching Ray, which is just a hit roll and there's no saving throw for half or not. You either hit and do full, or you miss and do nothing. However, this does not say evocation cantrips. It just says damaging cantrips. So take something like, say, Toll the Dead, which is an excellent necromancy cantrip, does D12 damage per, rank of the spell if the creature is already wounded. But the downside is they get a saving throw, and if they make it, they take none. But in your case, they're still going to take half, and there's no hit roll. So I like having a couple different types of damage. Like if I want something that has a low armor class, I can use my Scorching Ray. I can use my Firebolt, sorry. If it has a high armor class, then I can use Toll the Dead. And if it's already wounded, Toll the Dead becomes a lot more appealing. Especially if they make their saving throw knowing they're still going to take half damage. It actually means you're better with that spell than a Necromancer is, which is pretty funny. At level 10, you're going to get Empowered Evocation. You can add your Intelligence modifier to 1 damage roll of any Wizard Evocation spell you cast. This ability isn't phenomenal, but, more damage is more damage, and if you're doing a large AoE spell, like a Fireball or a Cone of Cold, that, let's assume you have 20 Intelligence, that's an extra 5 damage to one of the die, that is being applied to multiple creatures, and can, add up very, very quickly. So, like I said, it's not a bad ability. I don't think that it's phenomenal either. I wish it was kind of like a reroll ones or something like that, because I think that would have a lot more potential for a big payoff. But even as is, it's okay. However, there's one very interesting spell that you can use this with. Now, I need to be honest, I've never played Magic Missile like this in my life. If it said to roll 3d4 and add 1 per die, then I rolled 3d4 and added 1 to each one of those die. But once again, Jeremy Crawford sent out a tweet about this a year or two ago under Sage Advice, and said that you actually only roll 1 die and then multiply it by the number of missiles. Which, like I said, I've never played it like that. Nobody I've ever sat down with at a table's ever played it like that. But it also occurs to me that I could have just been doing it wrong this whole time, and other people were just taking their cues from me. So, who knows? Maybe I've been wrong this whole time. Maybe they changed it on a later edition. I just didn't notice because it was still so similar. Who knows? But if that's the case, then Magic Missile has a huge payoff with this ability, because you're only rolling the 1d4 plus 1. Let's say you roll a 3, add 1, 4. But if you have 20 Intelligence, that means you're now doing 9 damage per missile. You've more than doubled the damage of the missile because of the Intelligence bonus. And if we're to take this as Wizards of the Coast have clarified, it means that every missile is going to get that plus 5 because you're really only rolling once and multiplying by the number of missiles cast. It also means that this spell is going to upscale extremely well. And Magic Missile already upscales fairly well for a damage spell. And, the fact that you can just blast one target with a whole bunch of missiles or hit a bunch of different targets gives it some nice flexibility. So I think it's definitely worth pointing out that can be a very powerful combination if you're so inclined. However, again, I would probably talk to my Dungeon Master if I wanted to use that, and just make sure we're on the same page, because otherwise I could see that being kind of a cause for contention. And it's better to address it beforehand than to, knowingly cause problems at the gaming table, or potential problems anyway. Level 14, you're going to get Overchannel. So this is going to allow you to increase the power of a 1st through 5th level spell that deals damage. You can deal maximum damage with that spell. The first time you do so, you suffer no adverse effect. If you use this feature again before finishing a long rest, you take 2d12 necrotic damage for each level of the spell immediately after you cast it. Each time you use this feature again before finishing a long rest, the necrotic damage per spell level increases by 1d12. This ignores resistance and immunity. It's probably best to only try using this once per long rest. Just kind of think of it as like Frenzy on a Berserker Barbarian, but probably even worse, because instead of getting levels of exhaustion stacking, you're going to have levels of necrotic damage that will probably just outright kill you. So use it wisely. But I do think that it's a pretty good ability if you just use it once a day. As I mentioned before, one of the problems with a lot of our damage spells is they just don't scale very well and they don't keep up with hit points. But doing maximum damage automatically really helps to overcompensate, or to compensate, not overcompensate, helps to compensate for a lot of that problem, and helps these spells to remain relevant a lot more. And just like I said before, if you're doing a wide area effect damage, being able to do maximum damage means that there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to be able to help clear out. So those are it for the abilities. I kind of wanted to talk about kind of my opinion of direct damage spells as we get to higher levels. I realize this isn't going to be a problem in a lot of campaigns because most campaigns don't get to really high level. And again, Meteor Swarm, you're the exception to the rule here. Your damage is amazing, and your area of effect is so huge that, you know, who doesn't want to drop a bunch of meteors on something a mile away? You know, it's an amazing spell. But most of our other spells, like I said, they don't keep up. But in a lot of the encounters that I personally design as a dungeon master, I like to have lots and lots of trash for the players to have to fight their way through, in addition to the big boss. Part of this is because the way the math in 5th edition works out, whichever side has the most actions per round has a massive, massive advantage. So in other words, your party might be better off fighting like one powerful creature than they are fighting 100 orcs. Because those 100 orcs are just going to have so many attacks. And if the players don't use any sort of tactics to try to like wall of force them into segments and deal with one group or another, or any sort of like fog cloud to give them disadvantage or something, and the orcs are just allowed to shoot 100 times around at them, your party's probably going to get butchered way sooner against that than they would against something like an adult dragon, for example. Because the dragon just doesn't have anywhere near the number of actions the players do, even with legendary actions thrown in. In fact, I think this is why legendary actions exist, is to try to give these like more epic creatures a fighting chance against a large group of party members who are often making, like 2 or 3 attacks a round. Well, I mean, the dragon is only making 2 or 3 attacks a round normally, right? So if you don't have legendary actions, then these things just don't keep up. But one way to compensate for that when you're designing encounters is to have a bunch of trash minions that the players have to fight their way through. Maybe it's the big necromancer boss, but he's got all the summoned skeletons or zombies. And because the necromancer's 200 feet away at the start of the encounter, the players have to get through this horde of zombies and undead before they can get to him. And the fact that they're low level doesn't really matter. The fact is that it's going to take them several rounds to get to him or to fight their way through, or they're going to have to use high level spells like Dimension Door would be a great way to get past if your evoker took it, but of course you didn't, because you could have taken something else instead. You could have taken Fireball and Lightning Bolt and Mel's Acid Arrow and Minute Meteors, so, who needs Dimension Door? But anyways, the point is that with lots of minions to help even the odds, fights become a lot more even. And if, as a player, as a DM, I like that. As a player, I don't necessarily like that. I don't want it to be an even fight. I want us to win. And one of the best things about the Evoker is that you can still be very effective at clearing out this trash. It doesn't really matter that Fireball's no longer one-shotting an entire room and winning you the day, if you still use Fireball strategically at the right moment. Use it to clear a path for those barbarians and fighters so that they don't have to hack their way through 50 skeletons or zombies. You can clear out 20 of them, make a giant hole in the middle, and now those guys just use their dash action to go right on through the middle, and now they're going to be on top of the guy in in the barbarian's case, 1 round, in the fighter's case, about 5 rounds. But, that's life. And I find that evokers can still be very, very effective with this kind of stuff. And because of the ability to sculpt your spells, then, even if you have a low initiative, or even if you have a high initiative but just roll poorly for once, you still have a lot of added benefits there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of the different feats that I think are really, really good. Warcaster is pretty much always good on a caster, but if you're not planning on maintaining concentration on that many spells, then I think things like Spell Sniper become a lot more advantageous. Whenever you cast a spell that requires an attack roll, the spell's range is doubled. It's pretty handy. Your ranged spell attacks ignore half cover and 3/4 cover. And you've got a few other abilities as well, which are pretty handy. All in all, it makes Spell Sniper really, really nice. I also really like, if I can find it, Elemental Adept. Now, I don't think Elemental Adept is necessarily phenomenal. I mean, you choose one damage type. You can ignore resistance to damage type, which in my opinion is really good because sometimes you just don't know that something's resistant to that damage type. And when you roll damage, you can treat any of the ones as a 2. Again, not great, but it does help to have a little more consistency in your damage. I mean, the number of times where I've rolled a fireball, for example, and you just see a whole bunch of 5s and 6s, and then you get really excited for a second. And then you notice there's 3 1s in there as well. And it's amazing how quickly that brings down your average until, instead of doing like the 25 or 26 that you were first expecting, you realize you did like 17. And you're like, oh, well, that's, slightly above average, I guess. But, just, not as much as you were hoping it would be. And that kind of thing happens a lot, actually. So the ability to at least up the damage a bit can give you some nice consistency. It is only the 1 damage type, but ignoring resistance is actually kind of a big deal, like I said. And so I don't mind that one as much either. I still think the alert feat is a decent enough ability. You might want to consider it. I mean, I wouldn't value it as highly on the evoker as I would on some of the others. But going fast never hurts. And, maybe you want to do like a wall of fire or something, for example. In which case, getting that wall down and forcing the enemies to have to come through it is definitely a lot better than, having to encircle your own party. So I do think that there's a lot of value there too. I just wouldn't value it as much as I would on like a battlefield controller, for example. Now, I'm not going to go through like all the different evocation spells and which ones are good and which ones are bad or the damage spells. I kind of did that in my direct damage spell video. I think we're probably going to kind of wrap things up there. I want to make it clear though that I actually think evokers are pretty good. Is it my most preferred wizard subclass? No, that's probably still the diviner because the portent dice are just so freaking good. But I do think sculpt spells is amazing. I think overchannel is actually pretty good as well, as long as you just use it once a day and don't kill yourself with it. And I think that as long as you keep in mind the idea that you can still do other things besides just drop big damage spells. Have those big damage spells, know that when your party needs it, you've got it ready, and you're going to be able to not blow them up with it, which is even better. But don't feel that you have to have, 90% of your spell book taken up with damage spells. I think that's really a way to kind of box yourself in a way that you really don't need to. One of the great strengths of the wizard class is that they're so incredibly versatile on their spell list. You have the best spell list of any class in the game. I mean, yeah, you could argue bards can compete with you because of magical secrets, but they're just stealing all your best spells that weren't on their spell list to take for them. So even then, your spell list is still better. And, don't be afraid to dig into some of these other areas. And don't be afraid to take some damage spells too. I mean, you chose Evoker for a reason. And like I said, I might not think that damage spells are the best type of, the most efficient way to fight a combat. But sometimes dropping a big fireball on something is just the best and easiest way to deal with something. And, you can cast Hypnotic Pattern and stun a bunch of the goblins and keep them all mesmerized. But the truth is that fireball probably would have just killed them all, right? And, they would have been over and done with. So there is a time for that kind of stuff, and don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid to, pick up a bunch of other spells as well. Grab some rituals, grab the utility spells that wizards have, and, just play your class to its absolute fullest. Is really what I'm trying to say. Don't just limit yourself to only one small niche. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the Evoker Wizard. I actually really enjoy Evokers. I think they're pretty fun. But as always, subscribe, ring the bell, all that kind of stuff. And most importantly, leave your comments in the comment section. I love reading people's comments. I'd love to hear about your experiences playing Evokers or your thoughts on direct damage. Maybe you disagree with me, and that's fine too, right? These are just my opinions. I'm not, I've played a lot of D&D, but that doesn't make me an expert. Everybody's table is slightly different, and everybody's experiences are different as well. And, back when I was younger, I used to be all about just rolling lots of dice and trying to kill things out. You know, and then as I got older, I realized sometimes that's still good. Sometimes, you know, sometimes just force caging a few things and just eliminating from the fight is a lot better. Or force caging one really big thing and then killing him with range attacks and spells when he can't do anything about it. You know, that's satisfying in a different type of way. It's a way that, you know, your dungeon master starts furiously flipping through the monster manual trying to find something that can escape from your force cage while you inwardly think, yeah, force cage, it rules. So anyways, that's the video. Like I said, leave your comments in the comment section, and I'll see you next time in the dungeon.